What's going on, Donut Friendly Nation? Matthew Spear for the Donut Friendly Show. Good morning. Hope everyone's doing well. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the recent shooting in Georgia and share my thoughts on how I feel about it. And I know there are a lot of people who have feelings and emotions about this, and you've got the Second Amendment people who are saying, you know, guns are the only answer and guns worked in this situation, and the resourcement officer that was on location or resources officer on location ultimately got this coward to lay down his arms and lay on his belly and surrender. And you've got the people who are the anti-gun folks who are saying that, you know, this is Republicans' faults, and people who are wearing an AR-15 pen on their lapel are the reason, and it's Republicans. You know, it's interesting. I've never seen so many people completely move away from the root cause of this problem so quickly and refuse to address the true nature of why this keeps happening. And we always want the singular answer for a very complex problem. And I call it putting the Band-Aid on cancer. It'll never solve the problem. It'll never be a solution to say, oh, well, I'm just going to go ahead and ban guns. Okay. That is an extremely complicated problem that has no easy solution. And it's a lot more than just banning guns. You have to forcibly remove everyone's right to bear arms in the country. You have to remove 500,000 firearms, legacy firearms that are unserialized and are handed down from the generations. You have to somehow find the finances to purchase those firearms from every American. And then even when you do all of that and you remove the rights from the legal gun owner, you then have to still address the problem where the problem resides, which is illegal firearms in the hands of criminals. You then have to tackle the government's problem, which is disarming the police, the sheriffs, the constables. Because when there are no longer firearms available for the citizen, you have to remove it from the citizen patrol. Otherwise, you have to federalize every single local law enforcement, constable, sheriff, state trooper in order to have firearms. A lot of people think there are no firearms in England and that none of the officers or constables are armed. And that's true. They're not. But there are federal agencies inside of England, whether it be a QRT team or SWAT team or the three-letter agency, that are absolutely armed to the hilt. Why? Well, because they know that in certain situations, the only response that is effective is good guys with guns. So the complexity of just banning firearms is ridiculous. And it's not a solvable solution, because the solution is worse. I know nobody's going to like to hear that, than the actual problem itself. Now, none of the parents who have been through these shootings at a mall or a school are going to agree with that, because that is personal, individual experience, and that is why individual rights have to be concerned here, because the individual is what we're talking about. And individual experience is truly what our republic is about. The fact that every single American has unalienable rights. endowed by the Creator, natural and God-given rights. It demonstrates that we have to stop taking this problem from a collective viewpoint and start focusing on the individual viewpoint. So from an individual viewpoint, can we agree that not every single person on the planet has the same experience when it comes to gun violence? And I think every person can agree that it is a multifaceted, experiential, lifelong process with how guns have or have not impacted your life. And I will tell you, before the age of 20, guns had no impact on my life other than I love to go out and shoot a few and experience them from that standpoint. Now, between the ages of 20 and 35, a very different experience with firearms from a military perspective, and seeing people with firearms who wanted to harm and using firearms to stop those people from committing harm against innocents or family, friends, brothers and sisters in arms. My experience from 35 on was also different as a personal firearms owner and concealed carry holder and trainer of several sheriff's departments on how to effectively handle firearms and execute the task within and to complete the mission that they were set upon. And then I can tell you, as a 50-year-old man, having children who are surrounded by firearms in this house, the experiences change yet again. And those experiences are not interchangeable. Some may have similar experiences, but I promise you, nobody, like a thumbprint, is exactly the same. There are people who have suffered from family and domestic violence with firearms, muggings, maybe a negligent discharge. There are a lot of things. Maybe they've been fired upon and hit. Everybody's experience is different. So when we try to do a collective approach and just simply say, let's ban all firearms, nobody is going to get on the same page. There'll be people who will say yes. There are people who say no. People will be indifferent. People will fight for it. People will advocate. You're not going to solve that problem. But I think what we can all agree upon, the one common thread, is that dead kids will never be okay. So maybe we start there. Maybe this multifaceted problem isn't about banning guns or embracing every type of gun or creating mental institutions or more background checks or arming our schools or putting resource officers in place. Maybe none of those things are the one-size-fits-all solution for a multifaceted problem, the Band-Aid for cancer. Maybe if it is a cancer, we need to treat it like a cancer. And the first thing is the way that we have combated cancer or sexually transmitted diseases or teenage pregnancy or heart disease in this country is first by education. Maybe we need to educate parents, educate children, educate our teachers, our principals, our clergymen, our baseball coaches on what to look for when it comes to someone who may want to do harm upon others. We teach this with teenage suicide. My daughter's going through a course this week on how to recognize the signs of her friends. We do this with school counselors. We do this with baseball coaches to help kids with aggression and frustration when they're at bat and at the plate. Why would we not teach these people, these influential role models in society, the signs of someone who may want to do harm upon others? We do this with PTS and traumatic brain injury, Veterans Crisis Line, and 22 veterans dying a day and committing suicide a day. They teach us about battle buddies and swim buddies and how everybody can help veterans in need. Education. Education on how to handle firearms and why firearms can be dangerous, why children should never touch it. Why are we having an aversion to this topic when in school we talked about these things when I was younger? We talked about our dad's firearm. We talked about our dad's shotgun and how we should not touch. It was an open topic. It wasn't faux pas. It was standard operating procedure, SOP, to talk about these things. The same as it was about drugs and alcohol and all the other things that can cause damage in our lives. Why don't we talk about this anymore? There used to be a rifle in every pickup truck when I went to high school. Now, just empty racks of old Fords and Dodges with no firearms. You didn't see these things back then. So if it's not education, could it be something else? Well, certainly. Could it be that children are desensitized at a very young age, that the cathartic reaction to death and violence has been encroached upon at such an early young age, where children aren't able to process and disseminate the true meaning and loss of life and the devastation that occurs because they're inundating themselves with hundreds of hours of video games that are so realistic that maybe when the real thing happens, it's not as appalling and shocking, because the answer is, oh, I saw that on the local Call of Duty game, or I saw that when I played Fortnite. I'm a video game enthusiast. Video games have been in my life since I was 6 years old. I remember playing E.T. on Atari and ColecoVision. I remember Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. I've had every video game system. I don't want to shoot up a school. But the types of games that I played and the types of games that are out there today are ultra realistic. VR headsets, surround sound, realistic sounds of death and violence and graphic gore and blood. It's got to be traumatizing for the brain to see that on repetition. And the way that kids attach themselves to their online personas are almost to the point of Ready Player One, where these avatars are so darn important to who they are on the material plane. Take a look at Dungeons and Dragons, and you heard about the kids who had a level 29 demigod character that they had been working with 4 years, and that character died. And they subsequently took their own life. And then you saw this large push against Dungeons and Dragons and Ozzy Osbourne and records being played backwards, and it was all blamed for the problem, when nobody really knew that the problem is that we allow our children unfettered access to things that maybe their minds and brains aren't developed for. A lot of people say that the Bible is the most violent book ever written, and I would happen to agree, but you don't see preachers and pastors up there talking about some of the worst things in the Old Testament, or Sodom and Gomorrah, or Pillars of Salt, or the things that took place from rape or incest or murder, whether Cain and Abel. These stories which are designed to nurture the human mind into learning the differences between right and wrong. These stories were not written in full context when I was 6 and in Bible school. They were done with coloring books, and it was a softer, gentler approach. And then we got to read the truth when we were 18 and 20, 30, whatever, on our own. There was always this protected sack around our minds that protected us from some of the harsher realities. We would never sit around and watch the news all night for 5 hours a evening. It was on for an hour to 2 hours a day, in the morning when we woke up, and then for the evening news, and then we watched the local sitcom or played outside or whatever. We didn't sit down for 10 hours at a time and play a game where we incessantly murdered and killed people for profit or for fun, to find new discovering ways to slaughter the city and take over the drug cartel. I understand video games are a necessary evil, and it's hard for people to say, well, Matt, you work for Game Crazy, Hollywood Video, EB Games, Babbage's, etc. Yeah, I did. And I have sold a lot of games to a lot of people, but I always made sure that I never sold games to people when they weren't age appropriate. Now, it doesn't matter. Kid can walk in and they say that they can't, but they can because they buy it digitally and mom and dad aren't there. And you can say, well, there's protective barriers on these accounts where only 18 can buy them. Yeah, but you and I both know mom and dad don't care. So it brings me to a point of, sure, it might be video games too. It might be Game of Thrones and the violence we see, or Braveheart where limbs are being chopped off that desensitize our kids. But there's one common occurrence. And if we go back to the law, if we go back to video games, if we go back to parental supervision, keeping that proverbial embryonic sac around us to protect us from all things bad, it's people. People are the common equation among all these things. It's not guns. It doesn't matter where people are flying 2 planes into buildings, or people are poisoning Kool-Aid when a comet goes by, or people are renting a U-Haul and driving it through busy streets, or poisoning the water, or whatever it would be. These atrocities have one commonality, and that's people. That is the common thread. It's not a gun or a knife or an explosive incendiary device. It's people. And people inherently are flawed. And there is an evil that's inside everyone that is not being addressed. I look at this current family in Georgia. Nobody's talking about the superintendent of the actual school who turned down having armed resource officers at their location and was against it. And thank God that that was overturned. How does that person feel now? Can that person come out and say, I made a mistake, I was wrong? I don't think we'll hear that. I don't think we'll see that level of accountability where someone can say, I made a mistake. What about the FBI that spoke to this kid a year before, where the father is pleading, I don't want this to happen. I certainly can't imagine my child doing this. We talk about this all the time. That's the recording. And then goes and buys his son an AR-15 and says, have at it, son. I think we'll hear some contrition from him now, but that's because his life is on the line. Is it truly guilt? Because when I heard the story, the first thing I did was reassess the firearms in my house and said, I need to assess my children. Are they in a good state? Are they having problems at school? Are my firearms in a opportune place for them to access and use if they want to? It's the first thing I did. But hell, I'm also the person who thinks, my God, is there a way that we can somehow arm these teachers if the schools aren't going to help? So when my daughter started high school and my son started middle school, the first thing I started asking was, are there armed officers? And there are. There's like 12 officers at the high school. There's 3 or 4 at the middle school. And now I feel comfortable that my children will be protected. But there are parents out there who probably thought, is there a way I can arm my 16-year-old and keep it on the down low just in case? Because my God, if somebody comes in and starts shooting, I promise you the only thing you're considering is, do I have a firearm? Where's a gun? How do I find? They're not thinking about a phone. They're not thinking about 911. They're not thinking about, geez, I wish I would have reached out and touched this mentally deranged person and given them some sort of access to my appreciation and love and understanding. No, you want a gun, and you're going to want to take that person out. I guarantee it. And anyone who's been under return fire understands this. The only thing you want is a gun to defend yourself. to put yourself on equal and level playing ground to the person who's trying to eradicate you from this planet. Mental health is a huge part of this. But there's also something else. The ugly thing we don't want to talk about is we have neutered parents. We are so concerned with a child's well-being and if they're being coddled enough and if they're winning enough trophies and if they're considered to be included. That bullying in all cases, even remotely telling a kid that he's being a jerk or that he smells or that he won't shut up in class. I was 1 out of the 3. I would never shut up in class. I got my butt kicked for it. I deserved it. Other things were mean and cruel, but I survived. We survive. Everyone went through bullying. Everyone wasn't the cool kid at one point. But now we protect them from these things. And we sit here and say, well, they're inundated with violence and inundated with music and pornography and illicit drugs and alcohol. They are inundated. And the answer to that is to not overwhelm them with those things. It's to educate them carefully in a designed approach to expose them to these things at a gradual level in order to ensure that they understand the ramifications of their actions if they participate in these things. Why don't we do that when it comes to exposing them to the truths about their inequities? And maybe they are the smelly kid in class, that maybe they are the big mouth, that maybe they are offensive, that maybe they're not going to be a gymnast or a basketball player, maybe that they're not any good at football and they suck at chess, and maybe that they're just dumb and they need some help, that they may have something inside them that's stopping them from learning. What's wrong with slowly exposing children to the truth without making them feel that they're in a box their whole life? The other end has to be true. If our sense and feeling is to only provide them comfort and love and joy and never the backhand of dad across the butt or disappointment from their teacher that they're failing or that they're just not going to be the next president of the United States, but there's other things that they can be that would be amazing for them. If we can't do that, then we're writing a prescription of what's happening right now. We're not telling these kids the truth. We're not educating them and explaining to them that there is hope, that things will change and it will get better. But instead we tell them there's nothing wrong with you. You're okay. You're good looking. You're perfect. Don't change. Wear those weird clothes. Wear fishnet stockings. Wear makeup. And those were things that people did in secrecy to their families back in the day. They would put on their eyeliner or their fishnet stockings and they would get mocked and ridiculed. But punkers were some of the toughest people I've ever seen. They could throw down better than anybody. They were in mosh pits on the weekends and they were tough and they were strong. Some of them carried switchblades. You didn't screw with them. You left the punkers alone. Even the nerds had an edge to them when I was younger. Now, you're told to be effeminate, weak, not to stand up for yourself. And these kids get pushed around and beat up and picked on, and finally they just say, screw it. This is the best life has to offer. And I'm not okay with that, and these people are to blame. This is a multifaceted problem. And it's not just the guns. It's not just education. It's not just the schools. It's not just the police force. It's not just unsupervised neglect. And that's the truth. Listen to the word, unsupervised neglect. People are neglecting their children. They don't even know they're doing it. And then they're not even supervising the process. Like, if my parents ignored me, it was on purpose. There was always supervised neglect, though. Go out and play. Go out and kill yourself on a jungle gym that's 40 feet in the air with concrete at the bottom. Just go do that. But it was always supervised neglect. Go drink out of the hose. Here's a gun that looks like, it's a BB gun that looks like a rifle. Go walk down the street. Hopefully you don't get shot by a cop. It was always supervised neglect. They always knew where I was. There was always rules and parameters. Now, it's just do whatever you want as long as you just don't bother me. Do whatever you want just so I don't have to talk to you. Nobody sits at the dinner table anymore. We sit every night. This table will be in my family forever because it is worn to the nub from elbows and food and knives and scrapes and cuts from just throwing stuff on it and playing games on it. But we talk at this table. And yes, there's some neglect, but it's always supervised. There is no answer that's easy. I've had 3 massive shootings cross my pathway. And never directly involved in any of them, but absolutely involved from living in the community when these things took place. The Sila Vista Mall shooting in El Paso, I ran the Bath and Body Works there as a DM, and I would be in that mall every 90 days. I remember it well. The Aurora shooting, the Batman shooting, has impacted me forever as living and working in that area during the shooting. And I haven't watched a movie in comfort since. I check the exit every single time I go into a movie theater. I always carry in a movie theater. The last movie I went to, Deadpool, was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life because I just could not relax. And then Columbine. I remember the week, the day, the month. I know the Colorado Avalanche were ready to start a playoff series with the San Jose Sharks. I know that was postponed, and Columbine kind of kicked off all of this. And yes, we had massive events in history that changed the course of civility, but this was something completely different, targeting children on purpose. It's not just that our children are desensitized, we are. We see this all the time, and we want to take what J.D. Vance says when he says, and take partial quotes and says, this is life. That's not what he said. He says, I'm sorry or I'm saddened that this is a fact of life. This shouldn't be. And he's right. But the partisan hacks decide to go ahead and hit it and make this about politics because we use these shootings as an opportunity for self-aggrandizement. We don't put the kids first. We put the shooter first. We put their picture up. We give them the celebrity that they are dying for, that they want, the attention that they don't receive at home or they haven't received on the football field or at high school, and they can live vicariously through somebody else's destructive nature and replicate it. And they know that they're going to be on the news until the next event. And what do? We lap it up. We regurgitate it instead of blacking these things out. Nobody needs to see this. Nobody. There's not anyone on another school shooting. Fine. Talk about it and shut up. Don't bring out the photos. Don't interview all the kids. Don't make this a part of the nightly news. Don't make the trial something important. It doesn't educate. It desensitizes people to this. This, when it happens, should be a cathartic reaction that shakes us to the core, that makes us want to vomit, regurgitate our food. But instead, all it does is make us go, well, what color was the shooter? Were they a liberal? Let's go ahead and check the proverbial box. Let's put them in a category that either aligns them with us or will ignore it or repels them from us and puts them in the leftist column and puts them in the right-hand column. Or if it is a black person, let's just not talk about it. If it's a Republican, let's not bring it up anymore. Let's move to the point that guns aren't the problem. Oh, no, let's move it to the point that guns are the problem. And all we want to do is go into our corners, and because we're so anesthetized to this, is that is our protective sac, that embryonic sac that I've mentioned throughout this conversation, is that's the way we protect ourselves. That's the way we shield ourselves when we should immerse ourselves in it. When we need to take personal accountability of how do we solve this at the city, state, and local level, because this isn't a federal problem. This is a local problem. The FBI spoke to this kid. They spoke to the family. They had warning signs. They knew. The moment that that father bought a firearm, there should have been some sort of flag. Yes, as a constitutionalist, as a person who believes in the Second Amendment with all my soul, crazy people shouldn't have guns. I'm sorry. I don't want them to have them, because that puts me and my family in more danger. That is the Constitution, your individual rights and liberty. You have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and it's your job to defend that even when someone takes it. Why would we not want to attempt to prevent this from happening? Why, when the FBI goes to a door and they can't arrest the kid because he's 14 or 13 years old at the time, fine. There is a formal complaint. It is a verifiable complaint that this child wants to harm people. Why should that family be able to go out and buy a firearm if there's an open pending threat from this child? We don't allow felons to have guns. We don't allow people who deal drugs or have committed crimes to have guns. There's a penalty. If you have a certain amount of drugs and a firearm that is loaded or have any ammunition, those rounds can be considered to be attempted murder. If we assume the crime and the presumption of crime outright, and just because you're guilty by association, that's wrong. But if there is empirical data that this person is going to commit an atrocity, and then you go ahead and correlate it to the purchase of a firearm, why in the hell can we not say, wait a second, maybe we should just have a question asked? Maybe this should pop up and say, hey, wait a second. There's a current FBI. What are we doing background checks for anyway then? If we don't care that somebody had an FBI knock on their door for someone making a viable threat to kill children, well, then what the hell are we doing any of this for? Then why don't we just issue guns at birth and just, here you go, have a gun. There needs to be accountability. There's accountability for speech. There's accountability for the police in the 4th and 5th Amendment. There's accountability in the 14th Amendment. There's accountability throughout the Constitution. That the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is guaranteed to apply to you as long as you follow the processes of applying it to the other people you interact with. And the moment that you try to remove their life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness, they have a right to defend themselves. But if we're just going to say that you can have unregulated access, well, then what is the point of the FBI? What is the point of the CIA? What is the point of any agency if we're not going to preemptively make decisions that can keep us safe? I don't want red flag laws. I came from California. I had to modify every AR I had in my home. Do you know how much money that cost? I had to also consider that was on the ballot was background checks for ammo. Every time I bought a box of ammo, I had to fill out an individual background check. Was the proposed legislation? And thank God it's now unconstitutional. I don't want that. But what we don't get to say is that this situation in particular, a legal firearm was purchased under an active FBI investigation on a child that was deemed dangerous to society, and nothing happened. I know common sense gun owners are like, that's weird, considering that every other gun owner has had to fill out a background check, has had to go through that NCIC check, has had to go through to ensure that they are allowed to buy a firearm, that they're not on any illicit drugs, that they don't have any pending felonies, or they're not on probation. We've all been through it. And we allow ourselves to go through this process. Why would we all of a sudden just say, no, they found something. They have him posting things. They know his father openly admits that they check with the child and know that there's an issue. Yeah, we're just going to let dad go out and buy an AR-15 and not do anything about it. How about this? How about you, fine, let him buy the AR-15. Fine. How about you do this? How about you have a mandatory visit from the FBI after that? A voluntary visit. Oh, you can't do that. That impedes my rights. This is what I was talking about. There has to be some sort of compromise. It is the most regulated amendment in the book. There are 27,000 words referring to the word gun or firearm in current legislation, either on hold or being proposed in Washington. There are over 700 different laws around firearms across all 50 states that are unique. We've already overregulated this. Maybe, just maybe, we need to apply a common sense law, not common sense gun reform, not common sense gun laws, but common effing sense. That the FBI doesn't have a Ronco approach to this. The set it and forget it. Yeah, well, I went and talked to the kid, but we didn't follow up. That's on you. That's on the FBI, isn't it? Isn't it their job? Domestically? You went and talked to a kid who was going to shoot up a school and you didn't follow up for a year? Do you know how much crap can happen in high school in a year? When the father bought a gun and you know the check is open, it's common knowledge, it's right there in front of you, it's going to run across your desk. You get to see the background check. Get it red flag that maybe you should just follow up? Have another conversation? Not abrasive, not obtrusive. You don't take the guy out of his house and you send a frickin' SWAT team. You just knock the door and say, how are things now? Where are we? Where do we stand? We saw you purchased a firearm. We're not trying to be the Nazis. We're not trying to be the police department knocking down your door in 3 a.m. in the morning. But for God's sakes, we don't want dead kids, and we just have to ask the question, what's going on? I decided to buy my son a firearm. You what? You did what? Yeah, bought him an AR-15. He's 14. Yeah. Okay. We appreciate your time. And then warn the school. Get CPS involved. Follow the law. Instead of going after good families who want to discipline their children and spank their behinds when they misbehave or they do stupid stuff or they steal or beat somebody up or they're being a bully, how about you just use the law that's currently in place where you have a background check that you can see? You're not invading anyone's privacy. It's a federal form. But that's not what happened. Every one of these shooters we hear, the FBI visited them a year ago, then it's broken. It's not working, is it? More law isn't the answer. Enforce the laws we currently have. And maybe put some guns in these schools to protect these kids. And yes, that sucks. Teachers should not be guards. But bankers die-bag the freaking stolen money. They're instructed to push the silent alarm. They have signals to the security guard who does have a gun, and they have guards in their school or in the bank to stop theft. It's an inconvenience. But isn't that better than dead kids? Maybe it's more than one problem. Maybe there are multifaceted issues that need to be addressed. Yes, maybe we need to empower the FBI or some government agency that we do trust to actually follow up on this crap and do something about this. Maybe we need to empower teachers and have a voluntary program for teachers to carry if they're licensed and they have to go through a certain amount of training. Maybe we get veteran fathers like myself, and instead of doing the watchdog program where we're out there standing in front of the school, unarmed, where we can't protect these kids if somebody walks up and decides to start plugging children, How about you arm the fathers? How about you run these veterans through background checks? How give them a psychological profile? We'll do anything we need to do. And give these fathers jobs. Hell, I'll do it for free. So would every other veteran father out there. But the thing is you can pay them. You can put them on payroll. You can put them on staff. You have the money. We can reinforce the schools and stop making them a soft target. We can put checkpoints in the school because, yes, it's an inconvenience, but unfortunately, so are dead kids. Yes, we can open up hospitals again where we can actually put people on evaluation, and we have to monitor it, and we have to be careful. We can't drug our society and give them freaking lithium and turn them into vegetables and lock them up and throw away the key. People have rights, but there are clinically insane people that need to be helped, or they need to be secure because they're a danger to themselves and society. We don't have any places. We give them prescription drugs and SSRIs that chemically alter their brain, especially at young ages, and changes them forever with no psychological support, with no roadmap, with no embryonic sac to protect their influential brain. We load them up with psychotropic drugs and we want them to be zombies, and what we get are killing machines. This is a multifaceted problem with no singular solution. So when we sit here and cast aspersions on Republicans that you want dead kids, you're being disingenuous because Democrats don't have an answer either. Democrats had the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They didn't do anything. They didn't do a damn thing. Trump had it in 2016. He didn't do anything. At least he banned bump stocks, which did no good. Did nothing. Banning something doesn't stop it. Educating, accountability, responsibility, and God forbid, common sense. That when you go and knock a kid's door and he is Damien with his head spinning around and he's spewing green vomit all over the freaking house, that maybe that's someone you want to watch. Because you do it with terrorists. You do it with bank robbers. You do it with conservative voices and moms and dad that stands up against the school and you call us domestic terrorists. But you won't go ahead and keep an eye on a 13-year-old kid who wants to kill kids. This is more than one problem. This is society wanting a simple solution. And until we start knocking the door on hard problems and hard questions, and everyone moves to a stasis of we have to address each and every situation, each variable, because every situation's different, every person's different. Sometimes the signs are going to be right there in front of us, and other times they're going to be innocuous and benign. We've got to learn how to ask more questions. We've got to not violate people's privacy, but ensure that they want to share that their kid is struggling and having problems, and they recognize the signs through education. But what you're doing is you're just saying, oh, you know what? It's no big deal. It's just the guns. It's just the guns. Nope, it's crazy leftists. Nope, it's video games. The truth is it's all of those things, and we're doing nothing to solve any of it. Because the first step, nobody will take. The first step comes down to accountability. That's it. 43 minutes. Rambling. Frustration. I hope you enjoyed it. Watch tonight, Damani Felder. He'll be on. Good night. 7 o'clock.
Adjusting transmitter output.
This is the Don't Unfriend Me Show with your hosts, Matt, Leroy, Amy, and Olivia. Geopolitics, military analysis, and election coverage. Coming to you live on all major social media channels at The Dumb Show. Honest, direct, unfiltered. We can agree, we can disagree. Just don't unfriend me.